Philosophy of Hinduism by Babasaheb Ambedkar. Question 4, Part 4. The second mischief it does is to dissociate intelligence from work and create contempt for labor. The theory of the caste is that a Brahmin who is permitted to cultivate his intellect is not permitted to labor, indeed, is taught to look down upon labor, while the Shudra who is required to labor is not permitted to cultivate his intelligence. The disastrous consequence of this has been well portrayed by Mr. R.C. Dutt. Wealth without education and wealth is brutal. Each is necessary to everyone. They are necessary for the growth of a man. That the Brahmin should cultivate knowledge, Kshatriya should bear arms, the Vaishya should trade, and that the Shudra should serve is presented as a theory of mutual interdependence found in the family. It is asked why should the Shudra need trouble to acquire wealth when the three Varnas are there to support him? Why need the Shudra bother to take on education when the Brahmin to him he can go when the occasion for reading or writing arises? Why need the Shudra worry to arm himself because there is the Kshatriya to protect him? The theory of Chaturvarna, understood in this sense, may be looked and said to look upon the Shudra as the ward and the three Varnas as his guardians. Thus interpreted, it is a simple and alluring theory. Assuming this to be the correct view of the underlying conception of Chaturvarna, it seems to me that the system is neither foolproof nor knave-proof. What is to happen if the Brahmins, Vaishyas, and Kshatriyas fail to pursue knowledge, to engage in economic enterprises, and to be efficient soldiers, which are their respective functions? Contrariwise, suppose that they discharge their functions but flout their duty to the Shudra or to one another. What is to happen to the Shudra if the three classes refuse to support him on fair terms or combine to keep him down? Who is to safeguard the interests of the Shudra or, for that matter, of that of the Kshatriya and the Vaishya when the person who is trying to take the advantage of his ignorance is the Brahmin? Who is to defend the liberty of the Shudra or that of the Brahmin and the Vaishya when the person who is robbing him of it is the Kshatriya? Interdependence of one class on another class is inevitable. Even dependence on one class upon another sometimes may become allowable. But why make one person depend upon another in the matter of his vital needs? Education, everyone must have. Means of defense, everyone must have. These are the paramount requirements of every man for his self preservation. How can the fact that his neighbor is educated and armed help a man who is uneducated and disarmed? The whole theory is absurd. These are the questions which the defenders of the Chaturvarna do not seem to be troubled about. But they are very pertinent questions. Assuming their conception of Chaturvarna that the relationship between the different classes is that of ward and guardian is the real conception underlying Chaturvarna, it must be admitted that it makes no provision to safeguard the interests of the ward from the misdeeds of the guardian. Whether the relationship of guardian and ward was the real underlying conception on which Chaturvarna was based, there is no doubt that in practice the relation was that of master and servant. The three classes, Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, although not very happy in their mutual relationship, managed to work by compromise. The Brahmin flattered the Kshatriya and both let the Vaishya live in order to be able to live upon him. But the three agreed to beat down the Shudra. He was not allowed to acquire wealth lest he should be independent of the three Varnas. He was prohibited from acquiring knowledge lest he should keep a steady vigil regarding his interests. He was prohibited from bearing arms lest he should have the means to rebel against the authority. This is how the Shudras were treated by the Traya Varnikas is evidenced by the laws of Manu. There is no code of laws more infamous regarding social rights than the laws of Manu. Any instance from anywhere of social injustice must pale before it. Why have the mass of people tolerated the social ills to which they have been subjected? There have been social revolutions in other countries of the world. Why have there not been social revolutions in India is a question which has incessantly troubled me. There is only one answer which I can give, and it is that the lower classes of Hindus have been completely disabled for direct action on account of this wretched system of Chaturvarna. They could not bear arms, and without arms they could not rebel. They were all ploughmen, or rather condemned to be ploughmen, and they were allowed to convert their ploughshares into swords. They had no bayonets, and therefore everyone who chose ploughs did sit upon them. On account of the Chaturvarna, they could receive no education. They could not think out or know the way to their salvation. They were condemned to be lowly, and not knowing their way of escape and not having the means to escape, they become reconciled of eternal servitude, which they accepted as their inescapable fate. It is true that even in Europe, the strong has not shrunk from the exploitation and the spoliation of the weak, but in Europe, the strong has never contrived to make the weak helpless against exploitation so shamelessly as was the case in India among the Hindus. Social war has been raging between the strong and the weak far more violently in Europe than it has ever been in India. Yet the weak in Europe has had in him freedom of military service, his physical weapon, in suffrage, his political weapon, and in education, his moral weapon. Three weapons for emancipation were never withheld by the strong from the weak in Europe. All these weapons were, however, denied to the masses in India by Chaturvarna. There cannot be a more degrading system of social organization than Chaturvarna. It is this system which deadens, paralyzes, and cripples the people from helpful activity. There is no exaggeration. History bears ample evidence. There is only one period in Indian history which is a period of freedom, greatness, and glory. That is the period of the Maurya Empire. At all other times, the country suffered from defeat and darkness. But the Maurya Empire was a period when Chaturvarna was completely annihilated, when the Shudras, who constituted the mass of the people, came into their own and became the rulers of the country. This period of defeat and darkness is the period when Chaturvarna flourished to the damnation of the greater part of the people of the country. The end.